My name is Robin Hopper. I've been a potter for nearly 40 years. Since I was a child, I've been fascinated by the marks that have been made on surfaces of pots from different cultures. During the next 6 programs of this Making Marks series, we'll explore the decorative aspects of making pottery. When people first learn to make pots or ceramic objects, they usually spend a lot of time mastering the processes of manipulation required to shape the object. Too often, however, they spend little time considering how the object is to be finished once the basic form is achieved. Bare forms can be very inhibiting, like a blank canvas to a painter or a blank page to a writer. Instead, form and finish need to be considered together right from the start if coherent objects are to be made. This series focuses on this question of how best to create surfaces that develop and sustain a ceramic form. It's not a new question. Archaeologists have dug up pots or pieces of pots that show ceramic surfaces have been enriched since the earliest beginnings of pottery making. In the history of mankind's utilitarian ware, pots came on the scene after baskets. That much we know. What we don't know is how they evolved from the basket, or why even the earliest potters felt the need to decorate the surfaces of their work. One theory is that clay was smeared on the inside of the basket to prevent the seeds falling through the basket weave. One day a basket may have accidentally caught fire and the clay liner was fired to a hardened state of pottery. Certainly almost all pottery making cultures have used basket weave patterns impressed or scratched into the surface of the clay, as we see in this shard from the Anasazi Indians of northern Arizona. This basket-shaped, coiled, hand-built pot had its coils pinched together by the potter's fingers to imitate the basket weave pattern. The inside has been smoothed like the original basket liner. Something inside these ancient potters couldn't resist playing with the malleable clay surfaces. Look at this shard from Ecuador. I suspect that this surface contained meaning of some sort to the maker and the users of this pot. Why do I say this? Because that's where sophisticated surface decoration began, as lines and symbols with meaning. Either using words, as in the cuneiform characters scratched on pots and clay tablets in Mesopotamia, or using images to communicate religious or sacred cultural meanings. This piece of a bowl from Arizona, for example, is over 1,000 years old. Look at the surface detail. The zigzag designs are universal. In this case, the design likely represented the ladder into the kiva, the enclosed ceremonial chamber used by some American Indians. In other cases, the zigzag depicted lightning bolts, or indicated that the potter's world was close to water, either a river or an estuary. From the earliest times, then, the surfaces of pots have been used to communicate important cultural themes. I try and keep this tradition in mind when I decorate the surfaces of my own pots today. Another important aspect of work with surfaces is the relationship of the clay surface to the type of surface enrichment. Early potters learned to decorate clay in its various conditions: wet, soft, leather hard, like the consistency of cheddar cheese, or bone dry. To make handling the ware easier for glazing, it was later hardened by a low heat first firing. We call this the bisque firing. After the bisque firing comes glaze firing and possibly multiple firings. It all depends on the desired result. The ceramic surface can, in fact, be altered at any time. This pot, for example, uses marks made in soft clay as its primary decoration process. This piece, on the other hand, used rope and stamped impressions on leather-hard clay to create the pattern. And this piece had no marks applied until after it had been bisqued. At different times, in different cultures then, early potters developed a wide vocabulary of decoration processes to suit their needs and the conditions of the clays they used. Many of these techniques from around the world will be featured in this Making Marks series. These include marks of removal, addition, and impression, colored and liquid clays, pigmentation and resists, glazes and glazing, firing and post-firing effects. If you're not a potter or are new to the art of pottery making, this series will introduce you to many of the ways that surfaces are created and refined. It will also provide an overview of topics you may wish to explore in further detail. If, on the other hand, you are an experienced potter, you can use the ideas presented in the series to expand your techniques for making marks on ceramic surfaces. Viewers who require more technical information can refer to my book, The Ceramic Spectrum. As a teacher, I'm excited about video as an educational tool for potters. The extensive use of close-ups and the ability to rewind and replay videotapes combine to make this Making Marks series an excellent learning resource for potters working at all levels. Let's move to my studio now and get started. This program is now going to focus on the various methods of working with soft clay. We're going to slash, scratch, carve and cut the surfaces in a variation of different ways that will explore some of the soft medium of what the clay is all about. We can use tools, or we needn't use tools. Probably the best tools that we have are the 5 that we have on the end of each hand. Process of using the thumb or the fingers to create pattern in that surface, and beginning that process of developing drawings and composition on the ceramic surface. We can use different tools such as knives. Each knife has a different effect. You can turn the knife as you cut through it. You can then press from underneath and create areas where there's a controlled splitting occurred that doesn't actually go through the pot, but it creates a different sort of linear mark, say, than the mark of a pointed tool. The pointed tool is fairly simple in what it will do. We can also use tools with multiple scratching surfaces, such as this here, and that creates another sort of pattern. Any number of options are there for us. We can use different pattern making in the process of using a knife, and many different knives will give different sort of qualities entirely. If we have a round-ended knife such as a palette knife, we can press and move different sort of qualities, and we have to visualize in the long term the way that the glaze is going to work itself over this. That is the final point of the object itself. So all of these processes that we use in all of the methods of making surfaces and making marks on surfaces are towards that final object as it comes completed through the kiln, fully glazed or whatever other surface we decide to use, and finished. It's not until it's finished that we can get to appreciate all the variations that many of these textural things will do. We've just seen the marks of several tools into soft clay, and one of the qualities of soft clay is its softness. And what I'm going to do is take the qualities of that soft line and merge them into a drawing that will go on to this pot that's beside me. I've decided I wanted to use the theme of water lilies, so I've been drawing in the garden and looking at the water lily plant to get an idea of the way the plant moves. One of the problems that the potter always has is transferring a two-dimensional, which is working on a flat piece of paper, to a three-dimensional object, because the pattern goes around the back of the form. So what we're looking at is a series of rather fluid lines that are evocative of this particular plant.
using one of the tools that I started with before. I'm just going to work into that surface with a series of linear marks. I'm using the drawing of the water lilies in a very rough and free sort of way, and using the soft quality of the clay to express the sort of lines, of fluid lines that the plant has, and also at the same time emphasize the softness and the form of the piece itself. Quite often when we're dealing with decorated surfaces, we have to be really concerned that the decoration that we're putting onto that surface more than helps the shape of the piece. It's quite possible to destroy the shape of a good piece by insufficient or inadequate decoration in that surface. So I'm trying to get lines that the pot suggests and then move with those and get the drawing in place. Once the drawing's in place, then we can start having a little bit more fun with some of the texture. And the texture part of the process is utilizing some of the other tools and just pressing from inside this piece. I can start getting various changes in surface. You have to visualize in this particular art form what's going to happen in the process of firing and what other subsequent surfacing may be taking place. With this piece, I'm planning to fire it in a Raku kiln, but glaze part of the surface first. That will give quite a lot of variations in the way the surface develops. So we'll try and follow the life of this pot through some of the programs in the next little while and see some of the other things that happen to it. So we just saw the use of tools cutting into and surfacing, scratching the surfaces of soft clay. When the clay gets just a little bit harder, when what we call cheddar cheese-like, or cheese hard or leather hard, we can cut in slightly different ways. Then we can use knives for cutting the edges, such as this piece that's done by my wife Judy Dale. And she also does a lot of piercing, and piercing is done either by cutting with knives or by using a little brass tubular tool with a spring on it that just cuts through the soft clay and then presses in place and then pulls out the soft plug of clay, leaving the filigree edging. The filigree edging, by the time the thing is finished, the piece is finished, the detail will come out because of the way that the glaze reacts over the thin edges. So the glaze pulls away from the edge, and so we get a white line around the edge of the plate and a white line around the edge of the filigree. Lots of different glazes will do different sort of results like that, but it's something that we bear in mind when we're doing the process. Yet another cutting tool that we use in many different ways is a wire, and the wire can be just very simply a piece of wire attached to a couple of handles like this that's used for cutting a number of different things, or it can be attached to a sort of frame in like this one, where we can also stretch different types of wire on one of those frames. And what I have here is a twisted wire that is going to be pulled through this clay in order to create a pattern in the surface. In order to make the right thickness of slab cuts, we use pieces of wood that are stacked up each side. And this is a little rough on the top, so I'm just going to take the straight wire and straighten it up. Get rid of that first little bit. There. And then we'll take away one piece of wood each side. And what I'm going to do as I run it down here, the wire is stretched tightly across, and I'm going to go down and then just move the wire a little bit as I pull. And that creates a rhythmic pattern on the inside of the piece. Pieces like this can be used in slab building or as attachments to throne forms or other hand-built forms themselves. And the glaze, again, in the similar way to the one with the filigree patterning on it, the glaze would give lots of different dimensions as it goes thick and thin over these ridges. So the process of cutting with a wire, a twisted wire in this frame, can be used not only on slabs, it can also be used on the full surface of a thrown object, such as we have here. You have to be very careful about what you do with this, because you may cut right the way through the wall. These are some of the decorating processes that we've used so far, with wires, cutting knives, and pointed tools for drawing. In the next segment of the program, we're looking at surface removal processes, including fluting, sgraffito, and washed wax. The first surface removing technique that we're going to be watching here is fluting. And this is a process of making grooves in the surface using various sort of tools that have either wire ends that cut round-edged grooves, or square ends that cut square-edged grooves, or knife edges, and sometimes even bamboo tools are used for this. One of my favorite tools is a bent tent peg which has been sharpened, and that creates a very nice tool for using on smaller pieces, I'll show in a minute. Right now I'm going to flute this big vase, and utilizing the round-ended tool, just dragging it down. There's no fast way to the process of fluting. It's all very slow and meticulous. The clay has to be at exactly the right stage for this to work really well. It shouldn't have started to change color or be too hard. It should be just about leather hard or cheese hard state, that we can just pull the tool down without getting too much resistance in the process of doing that. This sort of fluting technique is quite traditional. It goes back at least into the Greeks and about 2,000 to 2,500 years ago. The Chinese also used it a lot in the Song dynasty particularly, and it's just a rather beautiful but simple way of emphasizing form. The shape is particularly emphasized by the way the fattening lines occur, and when the glaze is over it, it's even more obvious, this sort of quality of fatness. It's also somewhat reminiscent of the big fat fruity forms of melons and pumpkins and so on. The sort of thing that potters have always got used as their inspiration for the sort of forms and shapes that they make on the surfaces go on those shapes. I'm using the bent tent peg that has been sharpened for this particular form of fluting here, and it pulls down and leaves a very nice smooth line cut, so there won't be any cleaning up to do afterwards. A lot of fluting leaves slightly jagged edges that may need a little bit of cleaning up before it goes into the kiln. This particular technique is just another variation, and we call this one, it's a traditional technique that dates from the 18th century, and we call this cross-cut fluting or pineapple fluting. And basically it's a cut going in one direction one way, and then it's cut across in the opposite direction the other way, and has a surface that resembles the pineapple segments. So what we end up with here is a series of diamond shapes that stand out from the rest of the cut grooves. And as I say, the quality of the glaze is what enhances the pattern. This technique has been used on the teapot, or this section of the teapot in here, so you can get an idea of the way that surface plays with the glazes. Sometimes it's better than this, depending upon the glazes that go over, but here with this dark iron content glaze, it's where it's got rivulets of dark is where the glaze is thick, and where the glaze goes over the little diamonds it's thin, so it thins out as being brown against black. The last technique we're looking at this point is sgraffito. So sgraffito just is an Italian word that means scratch, and we're scratching through a coating of either a thin color of liquid clay or a thin color of pigment, and just by holding a tool and scratching a linear marking around it, it removes some of the pattern or the background color. I'm just cleaning out the grooves with this little brush of coconut fiber. It just gets in there like a little stippling brush and removes the burrs that otherwise would be sharp edges if they're fired. And this is exactly the same technique as Lucy Ree has used on this piece here, except that this is covered with a mixture of manganese and copper, which at a high temperature forms a glaze on its own, and that has been scratched through in exactly the same way as I scratched the bowl, except this is then just once fired and not having a twice firing system that most pottery has. The interaction with the manganese and copper produces gold and lustrous surfaces, and it's quite easy just to scratch through that to produce a very elegant linear pattern which helps to lift the form and create a rather beautiful elegant line in this piece. We're now going to look at the process of marks of removal with wax, washed wax technique. And that is where a pattern is drawn in wax and the background is moved away by sponging after the wax is put on. It can be done right on the bare clay, or it can be done with a coating of liquid clay on top of the bare pot first. Just softening up the brush with the wax here so that I can do a fluid brush pattern. As I said earlier in the program, much of the decoration that is put on pots has symbolic meaning, and the symbols are particularly important to those cultures. And then just taking a sponge and wetting this surface, the wax will resist the water, so what is underneath the wax will stay where it is. The background is being washed away, and I can selectively wash how much I feel I would like to have left in the surface, or how much I want what is now showing as the red part, how much I want that to stand up from the surface. That really is dependent upon the sort of final result that I want to get. It's just has to be done at the right time. The clay background part should be in a state where it's almost dry, almost bone dry, or anywhere between almost bone dry and absolutely bone dry is the right time to do that particular technique. And quite often patterns that are done in this way are quite beautiful, just left without actually covering them with glaze, so that you have a raised brush decoration pattern. A similar technique as using hot wax can be done by using shellac and brushing that on, but it does take a lot longer for the shellac to dry before you can wash the background away. The net result is basically the same. So in this program, we've looked at ways to cut and remove clay surfaces. In the next program, we'll be looking at methods of addition and impression.